So here we're going to take a look and see how we actually can do an adaptive layout. First thing I'm going to do that's quite useful is to press the outline button. That shows the outlines of all of the containers. And scroll down. The next thing I'm going to do is just to show you how we can actually try everything out in the IDE itself. We don't have to sort of fire up a live separate browser. So I'm going to select the page itself, and as I now drag the page you can see how the adaptive stuff's already working here. So that's pretty cool. Now what we'll do is to just explain some of the basic container structure. Containers is something you use an awful lot with adaptive layouts. So what we have here, if I right click, you can see we've got a panel called panel right. That's this one here, and that actually lives inside another container panel, which is this one going right across, which is contains all three columns, and that's got its layout mode set to horizontal. So it will stack these next to each other horizontally. If they don't fit, it will wrap one underneath. Another thing we can do is just look at this container structure quickly, and you can see here I've got my panel left, panel middle, and panel right. Right, the next thing is how does the actual adaptive layout behavior work? Well, what we do is, let's just leave it on this right hand panel. You can see we've got this property called adaptive layout one rule. So if I bring this up, I can see now that I've defined a rule. If the overall screen width, or the browser window, its width is between 10 pixels and 760, then we're modifying, in this case, just one property, which is the percent width. And here you can see the percent width of this column will change to 100%. Let's look at this column, because this one's the first two are actually a bit more interesting. By default, these are all set. These column widths of these panels are all set to. We do that here. They're set to 33%. Now let's go to the adaptive layout rule for this one. There are two rules here. If it's between 0 and 500 pixels, so that's for a pretty narrow screen, probably a smartphone, then its percent width changes to 100%. So it's the whole width of the screen. That will force the next panel, the middle panel, down underneath it, which is what we'd want. However, if it's between 500 and 760 pixels, so that's a narrow PC screen, or maybe an iPad in portrait mode, then its percentage width is set to 50%. So the same thing happens on this second column. So they're both 50%. That gets this pushed down. Another thing you can see which is of interest here is we've got a spacer panel. That's got a rule on it, because if it does get pushed underneath, I don't want to have that big empty space below these two. So we have an adaptive rule there which says if it's anything less than 760 pixels, then make that container invisible. We set its visible property to false. And the final thing you can see here is we've got a couple of different image things going on at the top depending on the width. By default, this is the default one which will be visible, but we can have adaptive rules for this as well. So if I look at this panel here, this container, and look at its rule, if it's less than 520 pixels, its visibility is set to true. So that will become visible. But we also, in that case, we want to make sure that this gets hidden, this top one. So if we select that container, you can see if it's greater than 720 pixels, its visibility is set to true. So there we go. So hopefully that gives you, that's not a tutorial exactly, but it gives you a rough understanding for the way that adaptive layout works.